Hello and welcome to On the Table. I'm Rachel and I'm here with my friends Rebecca and Corie, and today on the table we are discussing aliens.
Right.
I'm
interesting.
So
It's a really interesting topic and kind of a weird one to pick, but it's kind of a big deal in the world today. A lot of people are starting to get on board with the belief in aliens, and it's a big part of our entertainment industry.
Huge part. Yeah.
So it's kind of worth the conversation. So, do you have a favorite alien story or race or anything that you particularly like about aliens?
Well, I mean, I really like the fantasy genre in general, books, movies, TV shows. So, I mean, Star Wars fan. I am a Star Wars fan. So, I mean, there's that.
There's that.
There's that. I think I've seen all of the Star Trek series that existed when I was, you know, in that like preteen time period, because my dad liked watching Star Trek.
Trekkie.
So I watched all of them.
Adorable.
Yeah.
Never seen Star Trek.
Really?
Ever.
What?
I know.
Really?
I know.
Okay.
I know. I've been
You
told
need
many,
to.
and that's how everyone reacts. Really? Yeah. No, I never have. I've seen Star Wars.
Yeah.
But
Star
never
Wars
Star
is
Trek,
good. I really
ever.
enjoy Star Wars.
It's a little sad. Anyway, my favorite thing would probably be the X-Files.
Okay.
I love them.
The mystery, the suspense.
I think they're
couldn't
so
do it.
quirky and so.
Terrifying.
Some of them are scary, but most of them are just so quirky and out there and just outlandish and the most ridiculous but funny stories.
I think the first clip
they're
I
so
ever
good.
saw was the Squeaky Man.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Okay,
And
yeah, no,
after
that's
that, I
not a
was
good
like, I'm
first
never
one.
watching.
No, that's awful.
That's
Just
fair.
no,
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
Just that. Just nope.
Yeah, no,
I'm not
I
brave
watched
enough.
it with some friends of mine and my husband, and we've watched almost all the way through. We're not even quite done. We're close though.
The old ones and the new ones.
We've
Okay.
seen some of the new ones.
Okay.
Which is exciting that they've brought it back.
That's a whole. That's a thing right now. Like bringing
Yeah.
back
Yes.
television series that have.
It was really jarring for me for that first episode
Yeah.
that we saw. That was like the new. I think we watched it at Ryan's house. when
Okay.
we watched those
Yeah,
ones anyway.
yeah.
And I was like, they're so old. In my
Time
mind,
has happened,
Yeah.
yes.
In my mind, like I'm still watching the older episodes.
Yeah.
So to just go like that, there hasn't been that many years for me between
Yeah.
them, right? Obviously. So I was like, wait, hold on, what? When were these shot? And then I found out how old it was. I was like, whoa. Because you can tell it's older, but you just don't realize how old.
Yeah.
You can still appreciate it.
Yes.
They're still good quality.
Anyway, there's some really great episodes and stories in X-Files.
That's funny.
They're excellent.
I think I
about
would
you?
have to pick Star Trek. I appreciate all of the alien races for Star Trek, and it's kind of fun, like venturing out into space and meeting other planets with different
Yeah, the
different races.
concept of
I
like,
love that concept.
exploration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
The final frontier.
yes, but I think that I prefer the aliens from Guardians of the Galaxy because they come in
Guardians
different
of the
colors.
Galaxy is great. They come
I
in
like
different
it.
colors.
They do
It's
come in
like
different
shoes.
Not quite, but like they're more vibrantly colored. Like
Yes.
you've got blue aliens and
Yes.
purple aliens.
And it's so funny.
They're not all just
Yeah.
scary, weird
Hilarious.
face things. Like
Yes.
some of the aliens that different fiction has done is they're
They can
terrifying.
be terrifying.
They're weird.
Yeah, they really can
They're
be.
really creative, but they're just
They are.
be hard to have a conversation with that.
Yep.
So let's go over some UFO facts about the reality of UFOs as opposed to the fictional
Sure.
side. So there are about 150 sightings worldwide per day.
That's
Of UFOs.
mind blowing. How common this is. When I was doing
Yeah.
any research, I was like, I could not get over some of the numbers.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, like
that
to
I
be
was reading.
fair, a UFO doesn't equate to.
It's not an alien.
No, that's a good point.
We're
It's
talking an
unidentified
unidentified flying object, and
object.
90 to 95% of them can be explained by natural phenomena. So the planet Venus,
Right.
or
That's a huge one.
satellites,
Yeah.
they can be explained, but some of them can't. But just that there are 150-ish sightings per day
Of people seeing
of peop-
something that they
of
don't know what
something
it
that
is.
they can't,
Mind-blowing.
that maybe they can't explain,
Yeah.
is
Right.
kind of a big deal,
Yeah,
and
that's a
really
lot.
interesting. And I do know people who have seen things that they're like, I'm sure it was an alien because I can't explain it. I don't think it was an alien, but they're convinced. So former U.S. President Jimmy Carter claimed to see one in 1969. They've been detected by commercial and military radars. And
Right,
think
I have heard that.
That's interesting.
Yes.
They are said to change shape and merge into one another. So they appear to defy the laws of physics by traveling thousands of miles per hour and then changing directions without slowing down.
Yes.
More and more people all the time now believe in extraterrestrial life.
Tons.
Some polls are suggesting that up to 20 million Americans have seen a UFO and 4 million claim to have been abducted.
That was the most staggering, like, stat for me. I was like, I'm sorry, how many?
That's a lot of people.
4 million people claim to have been abducted.
That's a lot.
That's tons. And
Yeah.
that's just America.
That's just America, yeah.
So
and
crazy
this
to me.
is a global thing.
Yeah.
Because there's our claims for abductions
Yeah.
worldwide.
Yeah. So crazy.
Finding alien life is a goal for NASA and obviously SETI, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. That's a global obsession and it costs millions.
It does.
UFO experiences are often generational, so they'll span several generations in families. And I think that's interesting.
That is interesting.
And then UFO cults are some of the fastest growing religious movements in the world today.
Wow.
So
crazy.
it's bigger.
It's a big deal.
It is a
It is a big
fairly
deal.
big deal. I was kind of surprised because I know there's a lot of
Yeah.
people who kind of subscribe to it, but I figured it was kind of a fringe thing. But apparently
too.
it's becoming a little bit more
Yeah.
mainstream, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
And it is starting to affect our culture. I found, okay, so you have never seen Star Trek. This will not mean as
I know a little bit about Star Trek, but I've just never seen it.
okay.
The-
So
the
there
episodes
is
or
a
anything.
race on Star Trek called the Klingon.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So there is a language learning app that we can use today called
totally.
called Duolingo.
Yeah.
I used it for learning German, and they just released a beta version of Klingon.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of people who speak Klingon. Like
Yeah.
it's an impressive
It's-
fictional language. It's an
Seriously?
impressive fictional
Yeah.
language. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fictional languages are a thing. Like, there's not a lot of them,
Yeah,
but they
but
are a
they
thing. Like,
are.
you can
Yeah.
speak Elvish from
Yeah,
Lord of the
or like
Rings.
in
Like,
Game
you can
of
learn that.
Thrones.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's some fictional languages
There
and
is.
stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard of those, but I've never heard of like.
Klingon.
Oh yeah, people
Yeah.
speak it
Being a-
proudly.
Okay.
People speak it. So, and I thought that was really interesting. And sci-fi is the fastest growing genre, which accounts for like 70% of box office receipts at this point. Like it's a pretty big deal, which makes sense if you think of like some of the
Right.
top movies and the most popular movies of all time.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
ones are usually
Yeah, that makes
alien related.
sense.
But okay, so this I found out just recently and I thought this was really neat and weird and kind of interesting. There is, for Canada's Mint, they made a $20 UFO coin.
What they did?
They did. It's 1 ounce of pure silver. It glows in the dark.
What?
Yes. So in the dark, there's a spaceship on top and someone on the ground, kind of moving away from it. And in the dark, you see
What?
just the ship lights up
Canada, what?
because
Why have we spent money on this?
because,
sure.
because it depicts Canada's unexplained phenomena. It's the most popular UFO story we have, apparently. It's called the Falcon Lake Incident, and it's from Winnipeg in 1967, and it hasn't been explained.
The 60s, man, they were the
60s is
60s
huge.
UFO.
Yeah.
It was so popular in the
Yes.
60s.
So,
popular.
you can buy this coin right now because they made 4,000 of them, and it costs $130.
Wow.
I mean, I won't get one.
Strange.
But it's like an oval. Like it's not a regular round
They wanted to just
shape.
make it funky.
It's a
That's-
fun
yeah.
shape.
At least they had fun with it.
Yeah,
They
you should
did.
look it up. It's neat.
I will.
So yeah, for that story, just briefly, it was in 1967, and a guy was out looking for quartz and silver in the Precambrian Shield, and he came across a couple of 2 cigar-shaped objects with a reddish glow. They were hovering above the earth, and one left, and then one landed, and so he approached it, and he could hear voices inside and like the sound of an engine and like whirring like air, moving
Weird.
air. And it burned him when it left, like the doors closed and it burned him, and he was sick for weeks afterwards. And so it was investigated and was never explained, and it's like a famous Canadian story. I had never heard of it until I
neither.
found out about this coin, but it was really
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
So it's been reported on in like tons of different like TV shows, unsolved mysteries, books, magazines.
Right.
Like it's been recounted a couple of times, but I'd never heard of it. So apparently it's pretty popular. But I guess
If you're not in the
if you're not in UFO movement, you wouldn't know. But if you are, you would know about it. There's a lot of really famous UFO stories. So
there is a lot of really famous UFO stories. I went through a dark tunnel in YouTube where I was just like,
so easy to go.
And some of them are really quite fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting.
So one of the things, and we had just said 4 million claim to have been abducted. Abductions are a big part of alien, just everything to do with aliens. The culture. Yeah. There are entire groups that move to explain what happened or prove that people have been abducted.
It's huge.
It's a big deal. So let's just talk a little bit about abductions. MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network, does a lot, and that's not the only one. I know you had found another one.
Yeah, there's a few. It's C43EE, C4E, I think.
CE4.
CE4. That's what it is. You're right. It's Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind is what their title is.
Yep.
Yeah, which makes sense. And they do quite a bit of research. They have quite a bit of stuff going on, and it's mainly in the States that they're located. But yeah, they have a lot of things going on, and they found some really interesting statistics, and they even looked into what happens with the difference of abductions when it comes to Christians versus non-Christians.
That's interesting.
So they've really focused on categories.
They really
to try to figure stuff out.
And they really they have so many stats. Yeah, it's really cool.
Okay, so what typically happens then in an abduction story? Like, are they all the same, or are there certain things that kind of happen to everybody?
There is. Okay, so one of the articles that I was looking at, it's by a guy named Nate Sala, and he has, he just did a really brief description of what like a abduction story is.
Right.
So I'm just gonna read that for you guys. So basically, typically, they're paralyzed, someone's paralyzed, they're levitated out or up towards a beam of some kind. They're usually transported through some kind of a solid object, whether it's a wall, a car, or something like that. And then these aliens, they'll either appear out of thin air, sometimes they walk through solid objects, things like that. Okay. One of the things that he did note too while he was talking about this was depending on where you are, aliens appear different. So for example, in America, they're small, gray, big black eyes. But in England or Europe, they're usually tall, blonde, Nordic looking. In South America, it's more resembles a Bigfoot, things like that. That was something I had never heard, and I was like, that's kind of interesting that it's different.
So your culture might affect
what you see.
Totally affects what you see. Yeah, and then usually there's some kind of experiment with primitive tools of some kind. And he notes how odd this is, like considering that they're supposed to be so advanced. It doesn't seem
that is odd.
Like all the tools and stuff that they have are so advanced. Anyway, and then usually they're returned. Sometimes in between there'll be like a lesson of some kind. There's usually a proclamation from the alien that they're here in peace. They're things like that.
After they've gruesomely experimented on you,
and then
kidnapped you.
Yeah, and then they're just returned back to where they were located originally. So it's kind of interesting, but those are like the main points most abduction stories kind of go to. And it's interesting because through history they've changed. So abduction stories have really kind of shifted. One of the first abduction stories that was like really internationally known was from Antonio Villa-Boas, which I'm probably pronouncing his name a little bit wrong, but he's Brazilian. And Gary Bates, in his book Alien Intrusion, which is one of the books that I read sort of kind of leading up to this and studying a little bit, he recounts it really well. So one of the earliest claimed abduction cases occurred in October 1957, so this is a long time ago. A Brazilian farmer by the name of Antonio Villa-Boas was driving his tractor. He saw light descending on the earth, and as he headed for him, he noticed it was a shiny oval object. And although he tried to escape its path, it landed ahead of him. He claims that he tried to avoid its capture, and that several small figures wearing suits and helmets seized him and took him aboard the spacecraft. While he was on board, he tried to resist further, but they apparently stripped him down naked, and they performed medical-like experiments on him. So this included blood samples, like a ton of different things. So then they put him in a room where he had gas pumped into the room, which made him really ill. Like he was vomiting and all kinds of things. Yeah. And then he was covered in some kind of cream and lotion. Then there's a female alien that enters the room, things go on, and basically he believed that he's been used for breeding, essentially, and that's really why they captured him. And then once he gets dropped off back in this field, it was 4 hours that had passed since he was abducted. And at first this didn't become super, super famous, but then several years later, people had picked up his story, and it became one of the first stories that was internationally known. It was huge at the time, and people were claiming that, you know, many ufologists now claim that it's less likely to be real, but his is one of the few cases where hypnosis was not involved to recall the incidents, which usually it is.
Now it is, yeah. It's
now
really
it is.
common.
Yeah, and then there's another one that's very famous, also from quite a while ago, which is, if you know anything about UFOs, you've probably heard of this story, which is Barney and Betty Hill, and that's in September of 1961. And it's your really classic abduction case now. So they're driving home one night and they observe a bright colored object which seemed to be following them. Barney stopped to observe the object through binoculars, and he was shocked to see faces staring back at him from the windows in the craft. He was really scared from this, so he gets back into the car and he drives off. Soon after, the couple heard beeping sounds from the back of their car, and that was the last thing that they remembered before finishing their drive home. They were really disoriented, and I guess when they had looked at the time, it was 2 hours longer than what they had expected. And with their story, it was one of like the first widely known ones, especially in America, and theirs was recalled through hypnosis, but they reported it right away. There was people that had looked into it, and there was evidence for theirs in the fact that like on their car, you could see different like gray streaks where it looked like beams of some kind had hit their car, all kinds of things like that. So it's really quite interesting.
So there is like a physical,
exactly,
a physical
or
aspect,
at least a claim,
A claim, yeah. It looks like there are physical markers that are left where you can kind of say something happened.
For sure.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. So yeah, and then once they had been recalling them, so they went under hypnosis because just after this, both of them had gotten quite sick, and
which seems to be fairly common. A lot of people.
Yeah. So they got quite sick anyway. So they decided I think it was a couple of years after, they decided to do hypnosis and kind of see, you know, what memories are buried and those kinds of things. And it was interesting to note because although many people do believe that this is a real abduction story, it was interesting to note that when Barney was put under hypnosis, a lot of the facts that he recalled were identical to a movie called Invaders from Mars.
Okay.
So there were so many similarities that people weren't quite sure whether or not his account was real or whether or not he had just basically had these memories from this movie.
Well, and that's the thing, like from that era all the way up to today, we watch things, you know, that when we're conscious and when we're aware of we're watching them, we know that they're not real because we're sitting there watching a movie, so we're expecting to watch fiction.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if then you get put into a trance-like state with hypnosis, it's not a huge leap to see how you could, in that state, remember things that weren't actually your memories. They were things that you have seen or that you have imagined based off of things that you have read or things that people have told you.
Well, and hypnosis is one of those things that you can put memories into people's minds, and people do this today.
Yeah.
You can put a false memory into someone's mind where they will remember it from their childhood like it happened to them. But it didn't.
Right.
That's just part of hypnosis. So I know that there's an aspect where people believe that it's just taking out what already is there. I don't think that's entirely true, and there's evidence that suggests it's also putting stuff.
Right.
Like the power of suggestion.
And I think it's interesting the double standard with hypnosis sometimes too, because it's not something that's currently acceptable in the court of law, like nothing. It's not allowed to be used as evidence, but yet in UFO cases or in alien cases,
it's totally acceptable.
It is 100% most of the evidence. Not all, but a lot of it is through people recalling it through hypnosis.
I wonder if that's where we kind of get into the conspiracy side, because aliens does have a bit of a conspiracy side to it.
Definitely
So
does, yeah.
For sure.
maybe that's where.
Yeah, because it's not officially, there's all these people who say, no, we've had all these experiences, and yet then you get the government saying, well, there's no evidence for it, or there's very little evidence for it, so what is it? And so then people have to be like, they're covering it up. If you believe in aliens, then the government is either being grossly negligent and just ignoring it, or they're actively covering it up.
Yeah, they're trying to protect us because we couldn't handle the truth, kind of thing.
Yeah, something like that.
There's a lot of...
Yeah, the whole Men in Black thing.
Yeah, with conspiracy, there's always a reason to justify what you believe.
Exactly.
So that makes sense.
Right. It is interesting to see how culture does play a role in people's experiences,
It really
though, because
does.
that is a red flag. That's definitely a red flag
Big
when you're
time.
like, okay, if this really was something that was happening where aliens were coming into our solar system and visiting us, then why would it be different based on geographical locations on Earth? Why would they not all be the same? Or how is there not crossover of some sort?
Yes.
And then when you look at that culture and their mythologies that they have and their entertainment that they have and how closely linked their experiences seem to be to the entertainment that they have, it's just a big red flag.
It really is.
Because no two UFO sightings are exactly the same. They're always described as a little bit different. And interestingly, no one's ever seen them enter from outside Earth's atmosphere.
Right.
They're always seen from within. Like, we catch them on radar, but not from outer space. We're catching them, they're
here.
already here.
Yeah.
So maybe they're not really aliens. There's probably an alternative explanation.
One of the things that I found while I was doing some research to touch on like how it goes through culture too was was a really interesting quote in the Alien Intrusions book by Todd Carroll, and he says the delusion of the ancients and medievals are not couched in terms of aliens and spacecraft because these are our century creations. So we can laugh at the idea of gods taking the forms of swans to seduce beautiful women, or of devils impregnating nuns because they don't fit with our cultural prejudices and delusions. And I thought that was really interesting because if you look at those kind of stories and cases and things like that, they're really similar to abduction stories.
Definitely.
Like really similar.
Yeah.
Which I was like, whoa.
It's all, the human experience, we have things that we're afraid of.
Totally.
And psychologically, there's things that go on. And I'm not saying that accounts for every experience that people have, because I do believe in a spiritual world, though I don't believe in physical aliens abducting people. I do believe in a spiritual world. So, but I also believe in the psychology aspect of it, because the brain is, and the human form, like all of us, not just our mind, not just our body, but all of us, we're complicated. So there's a lot of stuff that we don't understand yet about how the human body works. So and we know enough about psychology where our brains can do weird things to ourselves. We can
for sure
induce a lot of things.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me about the abduction scenario, there's a lot of things that are similar, but there's always the different elements, and everyone has just a slightly different experience. So the aliens always seem like they're here for maybe just a slightly different reason.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I think is really, really interesting and is not often talked about is alien abductions can be stopped.
Right. Yes, I have
That's
heard
an
of this.
entire
ridiculous.
and the book Alien Intrusion by Gary Bates does talk about it.
This is the biggest red flag for it not being something physical that actually
I
happens.
totally agree with you.
Yeah.
So keep going.
Okay. So when it comes to stopping any sort of alien abduction, the people who cry out to Jesus or pray or sing hymns seem to stop instantaneously their abduction.
That's wild.
It's super
sequence.
crazy.
Doesn't matter what's happening. And with this book, here, I'm just going to borrow your book. So with this book, Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection, Gary Bates wrote this a while ago. They just did a documentary version,
Right.
which I have not yet seen.
Me neither.
But I'm going to.
Unfortunately.
But it's filled with testimonies of people who have been having an experience and then stopped it.
Wild.
They cry out to Jesus Christ, and it just stops, and it's over. So why don't aliens, if they're really aliens, why don't they like Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what's that all about?
Yeah. And I think that, like, the other thing that can make it sometimes confusing too is, like, probably in almost half of the cases, it was reported when I was doing research and stuff that they would appear like something, either a lost loved one who is already dead or something like that. Aliens would have them with them.
Okay.
Which I thought was really interesting because the Bible specifically warns against that.
Yeah.
And so for me, when I saw that, I was like, I didn't know that.
No.
And it's almost like they like beckon them to like come to the aliens. And I'm like, that's not something that most people just imagine. And even if it is, it's not like it's super coming from a spiritual place.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which takes aliens from being little green men or little gray men or
Yes. Yeah.
Nordic or whatever.
Bigfoots.
Or Bigfoots.
Whatever it is.
And all of a sudden, now we're talking demonics.
Yeah.
Totally.
We're talking about the spiritual realm. And that's something that we can take right out of Scripture. That's the biblical explanation for aliens is they're not actually beings from other places, other parts of the galaxy. They're from right here.
They're potentially just they're alien in the term, meaning they're not of Earth.
Yeah, they're not human.
Yeah, they're
spiritual.
heavenly. They're spiritual.
They're spiritual. It's an angel demon sort of conversation all of a sudden, and
which
that changes it.
I think is really interesting because this like very, very naturally can be seen through a biblical lens and explained and understood.
Absolutely.
Where
it's very simple.
Where I think a lot of people weren't expecting that, and then when they started doing this research into what stops alien abductions or experiences, and then it was just like bam, and whoa, what?
Why
and then
don't aliens like Christians?
All of a sudden,
it makes sense.
And then it makes sense.
Through a biblical lens, you're like, wait, the Bible talks about how there's a spiritual world and there's powers and principalities, and how a third of the angels fell, and now they're warring against humanity and against God. So
it makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
The other thing that Gary Bates notes in his novel, and this is a quote from it, there's a clear pattern. Impartial research shows that most abductees have, in the past, dabbled in what is commonly known as the occult, even if it was on a relatively minor basis. So, dabbling in the occult appears to be a common prerequisite for a CAS, that's classic abduction syndrome, and only intensifies afterwards.
Wow.
Which I was like, that's also so interesting.
That's really interesting.
I think it's interesting that they did the research for that.
Yeah.
But then, to also learn that, saying the name of Jesus or anything like that stops it, it's clear evidence for that, I think.
Yeah.
So.
For sure.
Yeah, and it's a scary concept that by opening yourself up to things like the occult and to things like this, that you can end up having some sort of experience, whether it's a vision or whether it's physical. Yeah, some sort of terrifying scenario just by wanting whatever it is that you wanted through dabbling in the occult. That's a good warning, I think.
Yeah, it really is.
And some of the aliens that do speak with people seem to speak against the Bible.
Yeah.
And that's also another sign that maybe there's more to it than that.
Yeah, because if they're aliens from another universe, why would they care?
Why would they care about
they would not care.
One specific faith.
No.
That's strange.
Yeah, and it's odd that it's just one.
Yeah.
It's not like if you say, other gods' names or anything like that, anything happens. It's literally just the name of Jesus.
Just Jesus.
Which is intriguing.
So that's interesting. So, okay. So for the Christian, maybe there are Christians who believe in aliens, which would stem from if you believe in evolution, that would follow, because the idea that we randomly over time were able to be created is the wrong term, on Earth, slowly over time. If we can do it here, other creatures can do it elsewhere. So that's I think where we're getting the sci-fi version, where people are starting to believe it, is it's becoming science rather than just science fiction, because the popular science of the day says evolution is true. So for the Christian who believes in aliens, are there any problems in Scripture that like, what are the conflicts there? Because there are some.
I mean,
I would say the first one is the effect of the curse of Adam's fall. Like, it's universal, right?
Totally.
So the whole creation groans, Romans 8:18-22. You have, follow me with this. You have Christ's atoning death, but he wouldn't be able to save extraterrestrials, right?
Because if they didn't know about him?
Well, they're not, because you've got the first Adam and the last Adam, but they're not a part of Adam. They're an entirely different something else.
Right.
So how, if Jesus is our kinsman redeemer,
right,
which is a blood relationship, man, fully man, how is he also going to save with Salvation Aliens.
That makes
I think
sense.
this fits into
How
like
does that, right? Do you know what I mean?
I think the only way to handle that, if you are a Christian who really believes in aliens or believes in another, where you would have to say, well, God could have hypothetically created a whole other race of whether they're humans or whether there's something else on some other planet, and Jesus went there too, but in a different form. And so it's similar. We've got like two separate ecosystems, if you will, and God is doing the whole salvation plan through them as well. Which, I mean, I guess you could have to say tediously possible, like possible, but unlikely, because
Why?
Exactly.
My question would be why?
Yeah.
Other than when it says, Christ died once for all.
Once for all.
But
but
maybe
that's
it's
from a
not Christ,
human
maybe
perspective.
That's from our,
Maybe it's
seeing it, I
different
guess.
on another planet. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe he has a different name. But then you're getting into some really non-biblical
You can,
ideas.
because
There's a lot you have to ignore with that.
Yeah, and
Like
you
a
can't,
lot.
you wouldn't be able to allow that belief about God or about Christ to impact what you believe about Christ and salvation here on earth without getting into heresy. So you can't, salvation plan is salvation plan for humans here on earth. That's what it is.
Yep.
So if you do choose to believe about another race of humans or whatever they are somewhere else with their own Jesus, okay, fine, but you can't touch that salvation plan here as a Christian without, because that you're getting into another gospel territory like Galatians talks about, or Paul very vehemently protects against. And I think too, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You wouldn't naturally read the Bible and go, oh, we should be looking for another kind of species in space, because it is so earth-centered.
Yeah.
And I mean, you absolutely can make the argument, I don't know how good it is, but you can make the argument that it's earth-centered because we are earthlings. We live here, and that's the perspective from which we have, of course. But as a Christian, if you believe in the inspiration of the scripture, then you have to ask yourself the question, why did God not inspire humans to then be looking to the stars or be looking to other planets for life?
If he's showing prophets the inside of heaven, why is he not sharing that information with us as well, that we're not alone?
And you can totally argue need to know. Like, God does stuff, does he have another, you can argue multiverse. You'd be like, does God have multiple universes in which he has different versions of but it descends into wild speculation.
Yeah.
I think it also
Because it's
completely
hypothetical.
loses the entire focus of the Bible
It
and
does.
Christianity in general when you go down that really dark, deep path.
Yeah.
Because there's so much you can keep going with that.
Hypothetical upon hypothetical upon hypothetical.
There's so much, I think, that you can be hypothetical with it, and not that it's not really fun to think
Sometimes.
about and
So
stuff
what
like
ifs
that.
can be fun, but
at the end of the day,
there's got to be some basis in reality.
You have to keep yourself grounded.
Yeah.
For
For
sure. Keep yourself grounded.
Yeah.
That's a good way of saying it, for sure.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
So, would the discovery, hypothetically, if SETI finds human life on another planet, hypothetically, would that destroy Christianity? I think no.
I think no. I think I
think it
agree with
would.
you. I think it would change my view of a lot of things.
Yeah, I have questions.
I
have questions, yeah.
I'd have
Yeah,
questions.
I think it would change your view on the will of God, in terms that in the Bible, his will is very human oriented, where he has a plan and a purpose for us, but then all of a sudden he would then necessarily have a plan and a purpose for this alien race.
Yes.
So I would be very curious.
Yeah.
But I don't think it
I'd be
destroys
intrigued.
Christianity.
No, I don't think it does either.
Because there's some
I
people
think
who are
that
like,
it-
when SETI finds aliens, you guys are going down. It's like, well,
First,
will they? Second, I don't think it would destroy it, but okay.
Yeah, I don't
would
think it
either.
would just. No, because it's still true.
It's not a contradiction.
Yeah.
No.
It's not an absolute contradiction. It would be a curiosity for sure.
Big
Yeah.
time. Big
But
time.
I do not
they're going to find anything.
Yeah,
they're not going to find. I really don't think they're going to find alien life. I'm convinced that aliens do not exist, which is,
Me too.
on the one hand, for my reality, makes sense to me that there are no aliens.
Yeah.
It's disappointing in my fictional world because I love. I really enjoy movies with aliens, not the scary ones.
Okay.
Although, I really did enjoy Independence Day.
That's good.
it's an action movie. I mean, why not?
Who doesn't like?
The stakes are high. The stakes are global. Yeah.
But And it's interesting when you're watching fiction where you have the problems of Earth in outer space with other races of aliens. Like it's interesting. It makes for interesting story.
It does.
But I think it ends there. It's fiction.
I think so too.
And we can enjoy it as fiction, but
I think it's
just
still
fiction.
fun to spectate about whether or not it's going to destroy Christianity or not. But no, I don't think it would.
No.
But I think that I was talking briefly with your mom a little bit about the whole alien discussion you're having today, and she made a really interesting point that I had never thought of ever. She was like, it's going to be interesting after the rapture, because she thinks that a lot of people could attribute it to aliens like beaming us up and taking troublemakers out. And I thought that was just an interesting thought. Like, I don't know if she necessarily believes that, but it was an interesting thought to be like, how conditioned is our culture for something like that to happen?
You know what?
It could be believable
really crazy
in that respect.
Her point is well taken, because there is a very dark underbelly of this whole alien movement that I might be sticking my feet into it, like a little bit too much here, but we might not have too much time to go into it. But the whole ancient alien movement.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, it's huge.
Spearheaded by Eric von Daniken. I have read his books. They are wild. I had to as a historian.
Yeah, you do.
Chariots of the Gods and whatnot. It's wild, guys.
It's intense.
But when he looks, for example, at the account of Enoch in Genesis, and the account of Elijah being taken up to heaven in the chariot of fire, he sees alien abduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is basis for her to think that. I don't know if she knows about the whole ancient alien movement, but there is at least basis for if there was some sort, if there is a rapture the way that part of Christianity envisions it today. That I think that's a plausible reaction. I mean,
totally.
How would you explain that?
How else are you going to explain it other than it being a rapture?
Yeah.
How else are you going to explain it?
Yeah.
And I know now you're going to know a lot more about this, but I know like there is theories about the pyramids and them being built by aliens and all kinds of things like that too, right?
There are theories, but don't believe them. Don't believe the whole pyramids were done by aliens, because for example, at the pyramids, like we know where they quarried the stone, and they're while it is a tremendous feat of human effort,
it is for sure.
It's demonstrably a human effort.
Okay.
So it doesn't magically need to be aliens who gave them the technology to build the pyramids. It's definitely doable as a human society. It's extremely impressive, but it's doable. It's doable.
Yeah.
So
we can do things. Our ancient relatives were smarter than we give them credit for.
And also, what's really interesting about the ancient alien movement is the one thing that they do have going for them is they look at ancient societies and they see and they tally up all the similarities between ancient societies, and there are some. They make a little bit too much out of it.
Right.
Saying it nicely. But they really focus on, oh, look, they have similarities in their religious beliefs, they have similarities in their architecture, but this doesn't have to be explained via aliens. Yeah. This can be explained via we have a common history as humans, and as we spread out across the globe, so did our history and so did our culture that we carried with us, and it grew and changed into the different cultures that we have today. So
that makes sense.
There are explanations that are not aliens coming in,
but
and
they're
giving
maybe
us
not as
divine
exciting.
Yeah, they're not as exciting.
If you want to believe in aliens, they're not as exciting.
It's true.
So
it's true.
It wouldn't. Yeah.
So aliens.
a great topic.
It
was so fun doing research for it, not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It was fascinating.
It's really interesting. And it's a big deal, like in Roswell every year, because of the Roswell incident.
Yes.
The city swells, like it doubles in population overnight for the long weekend, and they have tons of activities that they do, and it's crazy because it's so popular. People believe
I think
intently.
I think it really is interesting how, as humans, we have this desire for there to be something else.
Yeah.
I mean, we look around at the world and we go, could this possibly be all that there is?
Yeah.
And everyone has a different way of trying to fill that void and trying to explain that. And I think what you see in the alien movement largely as a result of that is that humans, we want something more.
Yeah.
So of course there are those people who have had really terrible experiences, whether they're physical or visions or psychosomatic. It's kind of one of those things, however you want to treat that. There are people who have had very negative experiences that have made them believe in this, and there are other people who just want to believe. Like that famous poster in X-Files, I want to believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Truth is out there.
Yeah. Whereas, and I think as Christians, we sit at a very different place, and if you're not in a different place, you should probably question it, where God is so able to fulfill that desire for there to be something else, because the Christian answer to there must be something else to this life is we say, yeah, there is.
There is.
You're right.
There is.
There
And the
absolutely
reason
is.
that you feel like this world isn't enough is because we've disconnected this world from God.
Exactly.
Our
Which
source.
is why
Totally.
we see religion being such a big thing in the world anyway. Because really you see this whole alien thing and it does become a religious belief.
Totally. And I think you nailed it on the head when you mentioned evolution as well. Like if you believe in evolution here, there is absolutely no reason for you not to believe that it hasn't happened
Why
on
not?
other planets.
Yeah.
There's no reason to believe that.
Because it's all chance. So
totally,
what are the
exactly.
chances that in this
Yeah.
huge
And if it can
universe-
happen to us
Yeah.
in the ridiculous chances,
And
if you
because-
believe that,
Because
then,
we believe, or
Yeah.
because so many people believe in evolution, I think it would be disappointing to venture into space, because we're working really hard to get people on Mars and beyond.
Yeah.
And how disappointing is it going to be if we really eventually do get out there in however long it would take us and find there's nobody else out there?
I bet you it'll still be pretty.
I think so
know.
too. I think it would be worth going. I mean, it would take your lifetime to get to the
a
not
long
even
time.
the edge of our our galaxy, which is huge, but it would be worth it in some respects. I wouldn't go.
no way.
I'd be so
I'm
sick.
too claustrophobic.
I can't
That's
do
true.
roller coasters.
Too
I can't do a
claustrophobic.
spaceship.
No.
It would be interesting.
I want to watch that live feed.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll watch it on my phone in the comfort of my
It won't
living
even be a
room.
phone
In
anymore.
a big
okay?
field.
Yeah.
I just where
on
I'm
my
not
coffee,
feeling
my
claustrophobic.
flat screen coffee table.
It's funny.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah. Okay, good discussion, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Interesting.
Well, thank you for joining us on this week's On the Table, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for joining the discussion we've thrown on the table today. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, you can give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest content from Bible Discovery TV. You can also find On the Table on Facebook with our latest episodes and some bonus content.